Can you share an example or problem that you might come across each phase?
So the biggest thing is going to be your due diligence period, and then you can determine what type of testing you need. So a lot of times if it was previously residential, you might not need to do utility testing and that kind of stuff. But if it's an entirely raw piece of land, we're going to check our soils. We want to make sure there's no muck down there, there's no sinkholes. You're going to want to do endangered species tests as well. Make sure you're not disturbing any critical endangered species, wetlands as well. If there's any conservation areas, you're going to want to do your survey and title. Make sure that the rights to the land, there's no easements or anything over the land that you want to use. And that's usually where we find a lot of issues. And with the soils, also in Florida, with a lot of land being previously farmlands, you find the issue of barns, oil drums, fertilizer in the soils. We also need to do like phase 1 testing to make sure nothing's contaminated. I have had projects where we've had to clean up and get the soil retested, or the water was affected from fertilizer leaching into the ground soils from it being a citrus farm for like 20 years. And we do have experts, biologists and geologists that come out and they test that and they send it out to labs to make sure there's no contamination in your soil or waters. So I'd say during the due diligence is really where you identify your risks and your hazards and what obstacles you're going to face through your time of development to get to your front door.
Maybe it's a zoning thing that got denied. What have you seen a plan B? Like, how did your team react to that and pivot?
So let's just say you have a piece of land and you want to put townhomes, but you need a higher density. And right now you have low density and you want high density. Low density maybe allows 5 homes per acre. High density might be like up to 18 or 20. So you need to rezone. And just kind of having those different concept plans and then being able to budget it out to project like, well, if I could only do the least amount, here's how I still make a profit, versus if I'm able to just do what I want, if they just approve it, here's what we can go forward with. And then just concept planning, design, all of that. That's essentially like the biggest chunk of add a pond, add a road, move a tree. The concept planning, I think, is the one thing that changes the most. And so even when you're picking your consulting team, just having multiple proposals because you want to look at not only pricing, but timing, but also what level of detail are they looking at, and just making sure you have your team lined up and ready to go as the need changes. And I think just because the plan B is there, it's easy to pivot, right? Because we're like, well, we already prepared for if this came our way and we already know what to expect. And okay, if it's not A, it's B. Cool. It takes off the anxiety, I think, of the entire equation.
Welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Guys, do I have a gem for you today? I got my friend Ashley Baksh on today from AB Land Consulting. And when I first talked to Ashley in person at a conference just a couple of months ago, I wanted to hang out with her every day because she had the wealth of knowledge that probably 99% of the world does not even come close to when it comes to getting your project for raw land and turning into shovel-ready land and turn into a beautiful, beautiful developments. So we got someone that's top-tier talent on the podcast today. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have her on because I've been trying to book her for months. So I got to jump for you. Ashley Baksh, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Hey, Kent. I'm good. I'm excited to finally make it on here.
Well, I know you're so busy and you're just working on so many projects. And I really wanted the community to meet you, Ashley, because I just know just how much you knew and the amount of projects and experience that you've had over your career. So maybe let's just start there really quick, Ashley. Can you just tell the audience who is Ashley and how did you even get into this world of real estate development?
Yeah, so I want to say that I got interested in real estate from a really young age. My family moved here from New York, and when I was about 9 years old, my dad started doing real estate as his first job out here in Florida. And as a daddy's girl, I'm like always in his office. I'm like playing when he's on the phone, and fax machines were cool back then. So I'd like, Dad, you got a fax? And I'd like bring it over to him. And it was all like paperwork, contracts, titles, deeds. And I'd see him have the lockbox. And I just thought it was like so fun to play with. And so I just was like really around him, around the environment, learning the terminology, like he's watching him on the MLS, that kind of stuff. And it was just naturally interesting to me. I don't know, because I wanted to hang out with my dad. And then when I could go with him to open houses, there's like cookies and a big empty house and it's so cool. And there's different landscaping and pool, it was just cool to me. It was so fascinating. And I just really took an interest from a young age. So I kind of knew I wanted to do business and I thought I wanted to be a realtor for the longest. As I grew up and I get into college and I figured out my personality, I was like, I don't think I have the people person skills to be a realtor. Like, I just didn't see myself showing houses and meeting with a million people and finding their dream home. That became really like, that gave me anxiety. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. That's stressful. And so I began exploring different fields of real estate, from appraisals, title, mortgage, and of course, development. So my first job out of college was with home builder. They were private and they were a custom home builder. And starting at an entry level, they kind of gave me the option to see the entire process from start to finish. So the land acquisition department, I would help them there. They would pull listings, keep track of like their pipeline documents, and kind of keep track of the dates for the contracts due diligence. I also had the chance to be involved with marketing, permitting, everything else, but I took the most to the land acquisition department. Something about their process, I think it's because it was a process I really liked. Like the way they find stuff, the level of detail they look at. I just took interest to that. So I spent the first 3 years over there in the land acquisition department. Then I went to another home builder, public home builder, and they were much larger. Before I knew it, I had been 10 years in home building, right?
What? Wow. And there's so many things to peel back from there. I mean, I just want to start with, sometimes in real estate, we hear a lot about people that want to quit their job. Like, I want to quit my job and I want to do real estate. And here you have Ashley, who came out of undergrad and started working in a real estate space. And I think this is such a great example for people to understand. You don't have to quit a W-2 to go into real estate. There are opportunities in real estate where you can acquire skills that are worth multi-millions of dollars easily, because when you understand how to look at land, how to look at this very particular asset class and turn it into something that's really, really valuable for residential purposes, now all of a sudden everybody's knocking on your door, just like how I was knocking on Ashley's door to get her time. So I just really want people to understand that you don't have to necessarily quit your W-2 and go on to real estate. There are positions in real estate where you can acquire skills and someone's paying you to learn this very, very specialized skill set while you get to have and enjoy that financial security for that peace of mind, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really valuable at that first job in those first 3 years to see everything from start to finish, because so many people even were like, get into sales, you'd kill it in sales. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. I need structure. I need Excel documents. I need land acquisition, like, you know, the level of due diligence that we dig into and like being in the weeds and in the detail. That's where I found my niche.
Ooh, so this is so good. I already know that you understand so much just with just how you talked about land acquisition. So Ashley, not a lot of people really know about real estate development, and it seems like this is a game for the ultra wealthy, and this is something that a regular person can't get into. But because you know so much, can you maybe just walk us through, if I can even call that, like chunks of work that are in each phase of a project, and how do you get a project from becoming like raw land dirt to something like what we call is like shovel ready and ready to be built into a building?
Yeah. So in my typical workflow process, first we're going to identify the deal. And so I look at 100 deals a week, maybe, and there might be 7 good ones. And then we want to start negotiating deal terms, looking at our zoning. What's our highest and best use? Can we or should we put certain product there or not? And then once you get into concept planning, that's when you'll start working with the city, the county, sometimes fish and wildlife, all the different departments that you need to bring a piece of land to life. And then we start, once we design our concept plan, submitting it to each of these different entities to get permits and approvals to move forward with our project.
Okay, you made that sound so simple, Ashley. That was incredible. Well, to make it more real, right? We talked about acquisitions and stuff like that. Maybe for each one of these phases, can you share a story of a real life example or problem that you might come across each phase? And to kind of set the stage for this, right? A lot of people, when they want to get in development, it sounds so big, right? It sounds like this nebulous topic that, hey, how do I actually do this? And if you were just to be able to share one example or issue that might happen in each phase, it's almost as if you're pulling back the curtain a little bit, Ashley, and making the dream of becoming a developer a little bit more achievable for the audience. So first of all, I appreciate you just spending your time, because I know your time is so valuable. But yeah, if you can just break it down for us, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is going to be your due diligence period. And so, depending on what state your land is in, if it's zoned or not, if it's raw land, if it's been previously used as anything like a farm, for example, or agricultural, as terminology would have it, that's the first thing you want to do. And then you can determine what type of testing you need. So, a lot of times, if it was previously residential, you might not need to do utility testing and that kind of stuff. But if it's an entirely raw piece of land, we're going to check our soils. We want to make sure there's no muck down there, there's no sinkholes, that it can support the foundation and the weight of the homes we intend to put. You're going to want to do endangered species tests as well. Make sure you're not disturbing any critical endangered species, wetlands as well, if there's any conservation areas, that kind of thing. You're going to want to do your survey and title. Make sure that the rights to the land, there's no easements or anything over the land that you want to use. And that's usually where we find a lot of issues. So when it comes to the species, sometimes you have to pay for mitigation. You have to go through permitting. You'll have to do specialized tests, like if it's certain birds, there's nesting season, and you have to do like your survey for those species during their nesting season, or when they're different seasons of the year is when you can do different testing. And then that can impact your development depending on how long that takes, because you can't do anything on the land until you take care of those endangered species. Same thing for wetlands. If you need to mitigate, you need to go through having permitting, going through your water management district, going through the Army Corps of Engineers, having them come walk and verify wetland lands and determine if you can mitigate that and fill it with suitable soils, or if you can't develop on that piece of land at all, which then affects your density, which can also affect your site plan. So I'd say during the due diligence is really where you identify your risk and your hazards and what obstacles you're going to face through your time of development to get to your front door, essentially, when the house is finished and you could have a front door.
Well, let's talk about the terrain stuff, because you just explained very, very well wetlands and the soil. Help people understand, for people that have never heard of it. They're like, so what if there's mud, or what if there are sinkholes in the land? Does that mean automatically you can't build there? What sort of remedies are there, if any?
Yeah, so not automatically, no. A lot of time if there's muck, it's not worth it to have contractors come out, scoop and remove the muck, and then to bring in dirt and suitable soils to backfill the area. And the thing is, you can't build on muck, mud, or any type of poorly drained sands, because your home will have foundation issues, it'll rot. Your foundation will settle and your home will start to crack. Like if you've ever noticed a house with like a crack on the wall, it's from the weight of the house compacting down the soils. And that's really important, because if you're putting like a townhome building or something like that, and it doesn't have a suitable foundation, you're going to have a lot of insurance issues like throughout the years, especially in Florida as well. That's something important, because hurricanes, you definitely, when we get these rains and everything, you don't want your whole first floor to be flooded and mucky, and a lot of backyards are having drainage issues and they're backing up and there's just puddles everywhere, and then that affects the foundation of your home.
Oh, that's going to be such a good clip for us to use, because sometimes we're like, oh, so that's why I have a crack in my wall in my home. That's going to be so good for people to recognize that, because I think the takeaway there is you can't just build anywhere you want. All right. You don't just pick up a piece of dirt and say, plop down a piece. That's not how it works.
And to touch on sinkholes, there has been occasions where you can fill it, but very recently I was working on a project and they drilled over 150 feet and they can't find the bottom of the sinkhole. So obviously you can't build on it, because, well, it could collapse at any time. A lot of, in the area that I'm in Central Florida, there are a lot of active sinkholes. That is a big concern. And a fun fact for anyone not from Orlando, the lake at Epcot is actually a giant sinkhole. They just filled it with water.
What? I didn't know that.
Yep.
Well, I should have known, because you're like a Disney expert. I should have known that. But
Yeah,
all right. Well, talked about sinkholes, talked about muck. In terms of wetlands, I mean, does that mean you have to apply for special permits to like build on it, or what's sort of the issue or the restraint when it comes to wetlands? So like, why do you need the Army Corps to kind of come in here and verify it, as an example?
Yeah, so the Army Corps will step in if the wetlands flow to any larger bodies of waters, like huge lakes, if they lead out to the ocean, if they're deep enough into aquifers. All of that is protected. And so the Army Corps would need to come out and verify. However, if it's like a smaller kind of pond or trench, you can get that filled. You can dig deeper. You can use that as your stormwater or retention ponds. So that's where that comes in. And again, Central Florida has tons of lakes and ponds and all of that. And so you want to make sure also you're not disturbing any species. There's a lot of conservation area, a lot of like natural parks, and it's all protected, and you'll have some pretty hefty fines. I've seen projects get entirely shut down for affecting conservation lines. And actually there was a community I had one time where the backyard, the lot line ended and a conservation line began. And there was a tree that was so big, it was half in the conservation area and half in the owner's lot. And they had to go through a permitting field day essentially to trim the tree, but it was a hazard of falling on their house. But because it was in a conservation area, they could not trim the tree. They even though there was a piece of the tree in their lot. So
wow, talk about
I've seen some interesting stuff.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, you just gave some really, really good examples of issues. You mentioned titles and like title search and doing the due diligence there and trying to figure out what easements are. Can you first define what an easement even is for the audience, that for folks that never heard of it, and what were some of the issues or common problems that you see come up all the time for when it comes to development?
Yeah, so an easement is pretty much hall pass for someone else to use a piece of your land, essentially, is the best way I can think of it. And so the biggest things I've seen for me for easements is the areas of Florida that are farmlands and they're landlocked and they don't have a direct access. So then someone might have an easement to just drive across your property so that they can access their property. And so a lot of times in development, if that's our HOA area or something like that, well, now your backyard neighbor can't just drive across any part of your property anymore. But if that's the only way they access their home, you're now responsible for getting them access to their house since they can no longer drive through your property.
Wow. Okay. So essentially, why was that easement even in place? Do you think typically someone has paid for that easement to say, hey, I need to be able to drive across your land into my land?
Sometimes it's for a fee, but neighbors can typically go to each other and I could be like, hey, buddy, I can't get to my house. Are you cool with me driving here? And you're more likely going to be like, yeah, buddy, sure, go for it. But now when you sell your piece of land to a developer is going to be like, you're not driving on my property at all, disturbing my residence, tearing up my HOA tracks. So.
Okay. Now, maybe one more thing. Can you tell the audience what landlocked means? I know what it is, but I think it's important for us to kind of define that for people that never heard of it.
Yeah. Landlocked is essentially when you don't have a road to access your property, and the only way to access your property is through someone else's.
Great explanation. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of the issues that you might face, and I really hope the audience understands, like we just talked about a lot of issues. Like, okay, what if you lock up a piece of land and there's muck or sinkholes there, right? What do you do? And in every one of these situations, you can get a third party, right? So you're not expected to be the soil expert, right, Ashley? Like we're not expected to be, but we can hire third parties for them.
Yeah.
And usually when they find a problem, they usually have some sort of recommendation or remedy, I'm assuming, and usually they can attach a number to that remedy. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, you're right. That's absolutely correct.
Because I think what I want the audience to understand is to be a little bit less afraid. Because right now, when they're listening to you, Ashley, they're like, well, oh man, what if I find a sinkhole? Like, what am I going to do? Just understand that you can hire third parties and they'll tell you a remedy. And now all of a sudden, if you can attach a number to that problem, you're going to be a little bit less afraid. Because now you can understand what it takes to solve it. Or you just hire someone like Ashley to help you manage through the process, because she's the expert when it comes down to this. And that's why I brought her on for all of you guys.
Yeah, so we'll typically work with the team. And something else I didn't touch on with the soils, also in Florida, with a lot of land being previously farmlands, you find the issue of barns, oil drums, fertilizer in the soils. We also need to do like testing, phase 1 testing, to make sure nothing's contaminated. I have had projects where we've had to clean up and get the soil retested, or the water was affected from fertilizer leaching into the ground soils from it being a citrus farm for like 20 years. So that's something else we have to look at when we're looking at soils. And we do have experts, biologists and geologists that come out and they test that and they send it out to labs to make sure there's no contamination in your soil or waters.
Wow. And what if there is contamination? What do you do there? Do you ship out the dirt and replace the dirt? What does that really mean?
Sometimes it depends on the contamination. Sometimes with fertilizers, again, you can like identify the area limits, scoop it out and remove it with clean fill. Yeah, that's basically it. You'd scoop it out and remove it, or if it's bad enough, like you just can't develop on the land. And especially if it seeps into your groundwater, it's like expect to add about a year to your development timeline because the government agencies have to come out and test the water and like test it 3 times to make sure it's clean and safe soils or waters to be building a development on.
Wow. So talk about contingencies, guys, right? Like if you find something, all of a sudden now it adds a year to your timeline. So that's why when we as developers and we lock up land, sometimes it's about mitigating risk. And if you don't anticipate some of these issues, because you don't have someone like Ashley on your team to help you think about potential issues, that could be very costly. You could be buying that land, servicing the debt on it for a whole year while you're trying to solve this problem before you can even get the project approved. Yeah. So this can be a costly mistake. And that's why Ashley just provided you all with millions of dollars of value right away. So make sure you guys follow Ashley on LinkedIn. And Ashley, I just had to plug you really quick on that piece.
Thanks.
Well, Ashley, we just talked about all the problems that came up. Like, can you maybe break it down for people? Like, what are groups of people that you work with and departments that you work with on a daily basis? Like, what are the roles? Because I think people need to understand the lay of the land a little bit better, just so that they have the process down, but who are they working with?
Yeah. So essentially, guys like me or you that own a piece of land, or a developer, an investor, a fund, or any kind of group that's looking to buy and get into a piece of land. Those are essentially my clients that will hire me on and be like, hey, here's what I'm looking at, or can you find me a piece of land to do X, Y, and Z project? And then along my process, I'll work with my engineers to create a budget. I'll work with the cities and counties to kind of lay out what are my fees, what's my timeline to get this project done, if it does or does not need to be rezoned, or if what I want to do is already allowed on that piece of property. And then I kind of work as the buyer's representative when we have these meetings, when I need to say, hey, I need this testing on this soil, I need this survey species to be done, I need whatever it is that the buyer needs. I'm kind of the person to coordinate the team, send them out, keep them on a timeline. Hey, we need this report back, we need these results, we need to schedule this testing. I'll connect with the city, the county, utilities, and making sure that we have all the services we need to build the project we want to build.
Wow, guys. In other words, Ashley is the one that makes it all happen. Just to be super, super clear, because if you find a piece of land, and now we all talked about all the different issues that just came up, right? The soil issues, right? What needs remediation? Who do you need to get out there? The biologists, the geologists. Someone needs to coordinate and make sure that they go out there. And also to think about and look out for you as the investor or developer, what potential issues might come up. And that's why I wanted to bring on Ashley, because this is such a valuable and integral piece of your team. Without someone like Ashley, you're going to have things that might fall through the cracks. You might not see issues. You might not recognize your own blind spots. So this is why you want someone like Ashley on your team. And I can't emphasize enough why I brought Ashley on. It's because, again, we all have this fear. Like, why do I think I can be a developer? Well, hopefully by knowing someone like Ashley and having someone like Ashley on your team, it could just remove that fear just a little bit for you, that allows you to take that first step and believe you can do it. Because when you have an all-star team with Ashley on it, now all of a sudden you can feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit less afraid, and just be a little bit more excited about taking that leap of faith. So, Ashley, who else do you work with? You talk about investment developers. Do you work with the engineers, the architects? Like, what's your involvement with them, and how do you kind of corral everybody to get to the same goal?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a list of people that I've been working with over the years. So they're kind of my first level of go-tos. Anyone I'm working with is free to bring on their own engineers. And basically, I'm the middle person. Like you said, I'll coordinate. Hey, let's get on a call. Let's design. You can fit X amount of units. We want a pool. We want a dog park. We want 100 parking spaces. And so I'll kind of facilitate those meetings and make sure, hey, whatever the owners and developers want is getting translated and done correctly on the engineering plans. And then I'll do a review of the engineering plans against a checklist for the cities and counties to make sure, like, when we submit it, we're not getting too many comments. There's always going to be something you need to change or do to meet the code, or something that we forgot. I'll do my very best to make sure by like the second round of comments, we're getting approvals.
Ooh, okay. So this is going to be a good question for you. So when an investor gets a piece of land and they lock it up, right? And they engage you, who do you engage with first and how do you make sure that they're top talent? Because I want this to be relevant to your stories, but also transferable to other developers all across the country. Maybe a better way to start this question is, how do someone's a good engineer? Let's do that based on your experience.
My experience is just that it's experience. Being in the industry for so long, you kind of know who's familiar with what counties, what areas, what products. Some guys are better at families, some guys are better at residential. And it's just from years and years of working with, I probably worked with over 80 engineers in Florida, engineering firms in total, just over my experience. And from the process, the comments, how they respond, submitting the paperwork timely, the communication, all of that will play a factor in my decision on how I value someone as the best.
Again, another plug for Ashley is she has worked with over 80 engineering firms. She is literally your cheat code for finding top talent by working with her, because she's already gone through the trials and the tribulations of filtering out who is the best folks to work with. So this is why this is literally a shortcut for those folks that are interested in development, because now all of a sudden you're working with someone like Ashley, and Ashley has had tons of experience and she's already gone through the exercise. Sometimes some of the most successful people in the world, if you think about who they are, they're just recruiters. They're just talent recruiters. We're in the business of attracting talent and creating superpower teams. And when you have someone that can easily help you filter out those folks, that's where you get a lot of value. And Ashley, this is applied to architects as well. So we just talked about civil engineers, right? That's what I'm assuming we just talked about. What about architects? Like, how do you know which architect to work with?
I have a few that I like, but also the engineers do a pretty good job of recommending architects. And a lot of the developers I work with already have someone who's drawn up their plans and they've built the product, and it's kind of just a copy and paste from another community. So I haven't had to do too much work with architects, but if I have to, there's a top 10 that I have readily available that I know I could go to. And kind of the same process, just from working with them over the years, being in the industry for 10 years, through all of Central Florida, basically from Tampa to Daytona. It's a wide spectrum.
And that's another piece. I think what I want to pull out of there is, you mentioned how they've done projects, they've gotten projects approved, they've gotten these products built. That's probably how a developer can mitigate the risk associated with your project, right? If you're working with an architect and they've gotten a project approved, that ultimately bumps up your level of certainty. And as your level of certainty goes up, your risk goes back down. So I just want people to understand that equation, where throughout this entire conversation, one, by making you all aware of the risk through Ashley's expertise, now all of a sudden you understand where to mitigate the risk. Now all of a sudden you understand how to work with top tier talent so that you don't go through all the costly mistakes of working with the wrong people. And that in turn can set you back months, if not years, of timing for your project. So Ashley, thank you for going through all of that stuff.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, Ashley, I think we just talked a lot about your expertise, but how do you specifically support developers, and what type of projects do you typically specialize in?
Yeah, I'll do a mix from residential, multifamily, commercial, some mixed use. I think my forte is definitely residential. That's the biggest chunk of experience I have. I've never done anything industrial. That's about the only thing. But I'm basically able to find highest and best use for different products, or figure out how to apply for a different zoning so that you can fit more units to make more profit, and just working with like design and kind of knowing where you can tweak things, add things, move things around to just have a very profitable investment.
I like that. So Ashley is essentially a thought leader you want to have on your team. In addition, really, her thought leadership comes from her experience. So that's why you got to have Ashley on your team. You got to make sure that she's able to help you think through all the potential loopholes. Now, I know you specialize in residential. Is that just townhomes, single family homes, multifamily apartment buildings? What do you mean by residential? I just want to make sure that the audience understands that.
Literally all of it. I've done from condos, affordable housing, apartments, townhomes, and then single family residences anywhere from 30 foot to 80 foot estate lot.
Wow, that's very specific. I love that. And I mean, obviously everyone's thinking like, okay, Ken, you keep talking about Ashley and how great she is, but what does it cost to work with someone like you, Ashley? And how do you typically structure your deals?
It depends on the deal itself. If it's a larger deal, I'd prefer to set up like I spend 10 hours a week on the deal, or 5, or whatever it may be. And then we kind of just established a fixed cost. at a monthly price. If it's a little bit of a smaller deal and maybe we only talk once or twice every 2 weeks, I can bill at an hourly rate. But some of the projects I get into, because essentially I'm creating value in the land, if I'm finding a piece of land for $1 million, and when we're done with rezoning and entitlements, you could sell it for 10 million, I think I deserve just a little bit more than my hourly rate. So I do participate in the equity side of things once deals are finished and sold to the developers, and even when their final home are for sale.
Wow. Okay. And I think the takeaway there is with these larger deals, there's way more ways to structure these deals to make it a win-win-win for everybody that's involved in the party. And in my opinion, this is why I brought Ashley. It's like, if I can find a land and I can partner with Ashley to get it approved, now all of a sudden I don't have to worry about every single detail of the process to get a project approved, right? I can focus on attracting the deal flow, getting the land, but having the confidence that someone like Ashley is on my team to help us get the project through to the finish line where it's shovel ready and approved. And then you have all your entitlements in place so that you can just go get your construction loan, close on it, pay for a permit, and all of a sudden now you're building a building from scratch. Yeah. And that's what's really cool.
Yeah. And some of the hats I wear along the way is I do project management. I do manage budgets. I do update actual costs every week so that way we know how much have we spent? Are we on time from when we originally scheduled it? What delays have we faced? And that's also what's helped me kind of learn over the years is that, hey, if you're working with a specific county, we think it's going to take us 3 months to get this done, but it might take us 6 because of the amount of inspections. And then when we call them, they take 2 weeks to get out there. And then there's hurricane season and you can 1,000% expect Duke to be on call. And so our projects get halted all the time during hurricane season on pause due to inclement weather. And then the service crews are gone for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. So we know if we're doing underground electric during hurricane season, just know you're going to find some kind of weather delay, that kind of things. You just kind of learn doing it. Just managing all of the timelines, the budgets, and just keeping track of what our delays are or what we could see. It's just still part of the process because at the end of the day, the investors want to know when are they going to get a return, right?
That's why you want someone like Ashley looking through your project, because all of these details that we just talked about, updating actuals, that's not something that, if you're not detail oriented, that might not be your forte. You need someone with the organization and the detail orientedness to actually execute on these projects, because it's not just all fun and games. It's not all theory once you lock up a project. This is where the rubber meets the road, and this is where you get a project approved. So thank you for going through that. Ashley, maybe this is a good question to ask you. For people that are trying to get into development right now, where are the blind spots or things that you wish you would have known when you got started? Can you share some lessons or stories that you can share with the audience today?
Yeah, I think what's important is just having multiple versions of plans. This is the kind of industry you always need a plan B, whether your zoning gets denied or your site plan has to change or your density or whatever it is. I feel like I've always needed to have a plan B. From day one, have a plan B, right? Whether it's design or sale or finished product, I feel along the process, you always kind of want to have, even when I'm just getting a proposal for getting work done on a site, I always want to have two or three. Don't always just go with the one and the first, and it's not a linear thing, development. It's a lot of bumps in the road, and just be prepared for setbacks. I think every project I've worked on ever in my life has had some kind of issue or obstacle or challenge or timing delay or change, or I've always needed a backup plan. So I think just knowing from day one to not just expect things are 100% going to go the way you imagine them going at day one. That's pretty unrealistic in larger development. And then I think the biggest thing is to keep learning. As much as you think you may know things, and I've been in the industry for 10 years, I still think there's so much more that I don't know. Laws are changing, codes, the need, the necessity, the demographics, the CMAs, the median income, everything's constantly changing. So don't think what might be true today might not be true tomorrow when it comes to the market or development or the need or just that kind of thing. I just want to say to always keep an open mind, always learn. There's always more to learn. I don't think there's anyone I know that feels like they know everything. Even when I go and talk to the county and I'm like, well, what does the code say? And what does the book say? It's always changing. It's always no one can say for certain, this is what it is.
I hope people get really inspired from listening to that, because I think some people might think, oh, there's no way I can ever be like Ashley. Ashley because Ashley's like 10 years into it. But just like Ashley said, she's still learning every single day. So there are new things that happen that come into the marketplace every single day. You are not too late. That's really what I want people to take away from this conversation. You are not too late to get into development game. And if you get into development game, always please have your plan B. Like Ashley said, I have never heard a development project that says, oh yeah, we went on time, on budget, everything went well. I've never heard of a development project like that. And I think that gives you give yourself a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
That things will happen and they're supposed to happen and they're never going to be anticipated. But I think when you have someone like Ashley helping you come up with a plan B or a plan C, that one gives you some comfort so you can sleep better at night. So you're not thinking like, oh, everything's riding on this approval. Well, we have a plan B just in case it doesn't happen. And Ashley, just to kind of make things a little bit less scary for people, like let's talk about one example of a plan B. What have you seen? Like maybe it's a zoning thing that got denied. What have you seen a plan B for a plan B? And what was sort of that plan B? Like how did your team react to that and pivot?
Yeah, so let's just say you have a piece of land and you want to put townhomes, but you need a higher density. So you need to rezone. And right now you have low density and you want high density. Low density maybe allows 5 homes per acre. High density might be like up to 18 or 20. And just kind of having those different concept plans and then being able to budget it out to project like, well, if I could only do the least amount, here's how I still make a profit versus if I'm able to just do what I want, if they just approve it, here's what we can go forward with. And then just concept planning, design, all of that. That's essentially like the biggest chunk of add a pond, add a road, move a tree. The concept planning, I think, is the one thing that changes the most. And so I know in Plan B, having a lot of different iterations of highest and best use for the land and not just like, all right, this is the house that's going to be there and this is what it's going to look like. Like I said, even when you're picking your consulting team, just having multiple proposals because you want to look at not only pricing, but timing, but also what level of detail are they looking at? There's different types of surveys that can be done. There's different levels of depth when it comes to drilling for soil studies that can be done and just making sure you have like your team lined up and ready to go for as the need changes. I think instead of at the 11th hour, like, oh, this isn't going to work and now we have to figure out how to do this, just having it ready to go. And I think just because the plan B is there, it's easy to pivot, right? Because we're like, well, we already prepared for if this came our way and we already know what to expect. And okay, if it's not A, it's B. Cool. It takes off the anxiety, I think, of the entire equation when the more prepared you are.
Yeah, that is so good. And I think I just want to highlight that this is why with Ashley's input, you can come up with the right plan Bs. And also the plan Bs are what informs your underwriting. Or we talk about performance. We see all these Excel models that get sent around all the time, but it's about the assumptions that goes into these models that allows you to figure out, okay, if I go from 5 townhomes to 18 townhomes, am I going to be able to finance this? If I finance this, what's my loan to cost or loan to value, whatever loan products I have? Those are the different steps that you have to go through for how you're actually going to execute on that plan, not just from the building aspect of it, or the negotiations with the city or the county to get the permits for it, but also how you're going to finance it and whether or not you're actually going to make a profit from it. Because guess what? If you're getting investors, and again, this is not a solicitation for any investments, it's not investment advice, but if you're getting or raising capital from other investors, they're going to want to know what your plan B is. And it's like, hey, if I invest in this deal, there's a capital risk. So how am I going to get paid back? And in case plan A doesn't work, what can I expect from plan B, right? Yeah. And those are going to be very, very important questions to have answered and readily prepared, but also for your own sanity.
Yeah, it's scary to be faced with the unknown. And I think I'm like one of my biggest qualities is wanting to be prepared and wanting to know or wanting to set myself up to know which ways it could go and how it could end if it went this way. I think that's like one of the biggest thing that has helped me thrive in this industry is just forward planning, right?
Yeah, and you got to have someone like that on your team. So, Ashley, you have dropped so many gems on this podcast. I cannot thank you enough. You brought such amazing value to the community. I'm so grateful that you came onto this podcast. And maybe I can just ask you a question. This is a question I ask everybody on a podcast. Why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of a supply of affordable housing, is like so hard to solve for?
Yeah, and I'm speaking for Central Florida essentially, but I just know the limited availability of land in the like MSAs, like Central Florida, downtown Orlando, Tampa. It's just very limited land. And for example, Polk County, which is maybe 45 minutes outside of downtown Orlando, You could get a blank lot for 20 to 30K to build on. In downtown Orlando, it's like 90K just for a blank lot. That is before permitting, the cost of development, labor, all of that. And so with that going on in our areas, I'm seeing a lot of gentrification in the areas growing up where there might have been some lower income housing just because of the location being in downtown. So that's one thing I think that's going on. And then zoning and land use restrictions. Florida has a Live Local Act. I don't know if that's across the country, but for us specifically, it's just to increase funding for affordable housing, tax incentives for developers, and just kind of fast tracking the process for zoning if you're going to be building a affordable housing project. And there are some cities that are actually against it, that are denying it, that are saying we don't support a Live Local Act, that we don't want to let you rezone to build affordable housing. And that's a big deal because why? And I think it's just also the cost of construction now is also going up. So people it's not affordable. If you can charge more, it's costing more to build. So it's costing more to rent, to sell, and then just the financial barriers overall for developers, for the city that they're imposing with the cost of the land, the permits, the fees, the rising costs of that. Polk County is next door to Orange County. So why is it 5 times as much to build a house a couple miles away?
Yeah, those are tough. I mean, between cost to build, cost of land, any sort of government policy that might be hindering the progress of building more affordable housing, there's a lot of things stacked against the potential faster solution for creating affordable housing for all. But I think today we got a little bit closer to that mission because you came onto the podcast, Ashley, and you were so willing and so graceful to share all the immense amount of knowledge with us. So Ashley, for people that want to get in touch with you or maybe partner with you in a project, how can they find you and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say just shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I think a lot of my conversations are just back and forth, like, before I'm billing hours or anything like that. Like, I'm happy to just share my knowledge, give you advice at what to look at. Like, I want to see everyone succeed. So I'd say just give me a call, ask whatever you want. Feel free to pick my brain. I'm at my desk every single day. And then also LinkedIn, if you want to connect. LinkedIn is fine as well if you need a face for the questions.
Yes. All right. Guys, please make sure you follow her on LinkedIn, Ashley Baksh. That's Ashley, last name Baksh, Baksh, for those that are listening. And Ashley, thank you so much again for coming onto the podcast. Without people like you, I would have never had the home I grew up in. Without people so grateful, I'm just so grateful that you came on and shared so much knowledge because not everybody's so open and willing to do that and to be willing to educate other folks. So for that, I thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
I'm happy. Thank you for having me. You're so welcome. And anyone who has any questions, just feel free to chat with me.
Yes. I can't wait to bring you onto the podcast in a year from now and see where you are. And we'll talk to you soon. All right, Ashley?
All right. Good.
All right. And we are out.